the outside. I hope that it's shining on the inside. Uh, yeah, I was going to say something else I thought was clever, but I just hope y'all are doing okay. That's it. I just hope that you all are doing okay, finding a way to smile each day, finding a way to laugh or enjoy yourself in some way each day. What I'm finding is it's the small things that have the greatest impact. So if we can do more of the small things, we'll begin to feel those small things mount up to great things, to great impacts. And you may be underestimating the value of small things, doing those small pieces of self care that seem insignificant, but when you add them up, you know, as I mentioned the other day, just taking time to take a random shower during the day, if that's what it takes, to putting some hot water together and putting your feet, soaking your feet, okay, soaking your toes, whatever it is, like doing those small things. Heck, if putting on makeup makes you feel pretty, if doing your hair, cutting your hair, if something like that helps you feel better about you, then doing that, doing those small things that you are in control of to help, move the needle on your, not just your mindset, but your level of confidence and level of care and compassion for others. Sometimes, we only are able to have a certain amount of compassion, right? We feel like there's not enough. We feel like we don't have enough to give away. But you'll find that the more you give to yourself, the more there'll be out there for other people to give. You'll have a surplus. And so that's what it's all about as well, because you'll find, the more you give, the more you receive. And when you create, let's say, a shift in mentality and mindset to be willing to give the good things that you have to folks, then that begins to shift the opportunity to care, to love, to understand others. Yeah, and it creates just a greater capacity. So it's like, a lot of times people talk about, stepping out of the box, which is certainly an amazing concept. And then there are those folks that maybe taking it a step further. Maybe I'm one of those folks that may mention uh, not just to step out of the box, but just expand your box that you're in. And you're like, what does that mean? To expand the box means you get to keep everything. You're not leaving anything behind. You're just making more room. You are developing yourself and creating a greater capacity for possibility, for creativity. This particular time and space. Now, if you're listening to this via podcast, you're watching me live video, this time in particular we are in 2020 right now during a pandemic quarantine, if you will. And even if you won't, that's what they're willing right now. And if you're paying attention, if you're being intentional, this is one of those pivotal moments where you should be expanding your box, right? Because heck, the notion of stepping out of your box right now leaves everything behind that maybe you once knew, depending on how deep you want to think into this thing, right? But ultimately, just imagine everything you already know, right? You look around, you look to your left, you look to your right, at everything you know. And then you're like, I need more. Let me make room. So then you begin to push the walls out a little bit further to create some more room for what you can develop, for what you can own, for what you can create. And it's those pieces, it's times like this where you're able to pause and expand the box that you've been in on a regular basis or every day. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that spoke to you in some way, shape, or form. That's not exactly what I got on here to say, because I got on here to discuss something from the Book of Mindset Secrets. That's where we're coming from. The Book of Mindset Secrets, number 19. What is number 19 in the Book of Mindset Secrets? Number 19 is Be honest about your misfortune. I'll show it to you. Right? Boom, there it is, right? Be honest about your misfortune. You're like, I don't understand. What does that mean? Some people say things, well, this happened to me, and they don't plug themselves into the equation. I'm going to read that part again. Some people say things, well, this happened to me, and they don't plug themselves into the equation. Let's tell the whole story. If you're not honest with yourself, you won't be able to be honest with anyone else. Be honest about your misfortune. When you're honest about your misfortune, you give yourself the power to do something about it. Does it make sense to blame everything on a teacher if you did things that resulted in you getting in trouble? Some people get upset because a teacher has said they caused trouble. Ask yourself, do I cause trouble? If the answer is yes to any of those, then do better. Teachers are people too. Remember that when you want to drive them crazy or make their days harder, especially as you think about now how so many people are homeschooling. Now they get a true taste, right? But anyway, it's possible someone has beat you to it. Work work together so you can both win and enjoy your day. I'm going to read this one more time. Again, it's number 19. Be honest about your misfortune, and then I'll explain. Some people say things, well, this happened to me, and they don't plug themselves into the equation. Let's tell the whole story. If you're not honest with yourself, you won't be able to be honest with anyone else. Be honest about your misfortune. When you're honest about your misfortune, you give yourself the power to do something about it. Does it make sense to blame everything on a teacher if you did things that resulted in you getting in trouble? Some people get upset because the teacher has said they caused trouble. Ask yourself, do I cause trouble? Do I? If the answer is yes to any of those, then do better. Teachers are people too. Remember that when you want to drive them crazy or make their day harder, it's possible that someone has already beat you to it. Work together so you can both win and enjoy your day. Cool. So that's from the book of Mindset Secrets. That was number 19. Now you're like, Stan, what does that mean? Be honest about your misfortune. Listen, like quite simply, it's like owning your ish. And there's this word that's not being used very much and certainly hasn't in the recent future. And that word is accountability. Like we have to decide if we're going to be accountable for things that we've experienced or what we're going through. And this is just, I use, let's say, a teacher as one example. But there's so much that we experience from day to day. And if we decide to own our role in it, then you can fix it. If you've made a mistake, if you've had a misstep, it's not about owning everyone's issue. It's about owning the piece that you had in it. In this case, I've seen enough, let's say, movies. I've read enough books. I've heard enough interviews. I've seen enough people to know that, hey, like people mess up. Like folks mess up. I've also seen a lot of people with stories like my teacher told me I was never going to be nothing. Heck, I had a couple teachers actually that told me that I had, ADD and I had educational issues and I should be held back. Right. So I'm not immune to that. And there are folks that I knew, like I've heard them have conversations with people about how teachers said that they weren't going to be anything or how they were clowns and how they were always a distraction. And people use that as motivation later on. Like when they're telling their story, they're like, I had this one teacher, they told me I wasn't going to be anything because I was all, and I'm like, wait a minute. Maybe because you literally like wreaked havoc on the classroom? Like maybe that's why? But people, they control their own narrative, but ultimately it's going to be really important to get in touch with your accountability so then you can do something about it. Everything can't always be someone else's fault. Those excuses eventually run out. People will begin to see past and see through it was someone else's. I'm not a mathematician, but I understand common denominators. And if everyone begins to realize, wait a minute, everyone's story is the same. This person had issues with several people, right? If that is what's happening, then at some point you have to be like, it was me. Accountability takes a level of maturity as well. And we often ask that accountability of others, but we don't ask it of ourselves. So this number 19, being honest about your misfortune, it's really about just owning the parts that you play in situations and circumstances, because owning them gives you power to be willing to do something about it. In this case, I mentioned teachers as the example, and folks have to understand that teachers are humans too. And a lot of people, especially now with a lot of homeschooling and depending on teachers, understand how important teachers are. And sometimes kids grow up and they realize, oh, wow, that teacher's a real person. They have real feelings. And when I spend time coaching teachers, it's helping obviously teachers understand that these kids and some teachers already understand this. These kids are real people. They have real issues. And so you have two different sets of real people with real issues coming together. And sometimes never finding that commonality, that understanding of what life is like on both spectrums for them. And that's not just teacher and student, that's supervisor, manager, employee, right? That is parent, kid. Like all those conversations exchange hands, but it's really important that along the way that there has to be some level of accountability. And if you're only willing to blame other people, then the fact is that it could possibly be you. I hope that this was helpful from number 19 of the Book of Mindset Seekers. I hope you find this helpful, and that if you did find it helpful, that you either leave a comment somewhere on social media letting me know your favorite takeaway, or you go on iTunes and leave a review with your favorite takeaway from this particular episode of Mental Flight School. Just continue to remember that, effort on fire beats knowledge on ice, and you just have to be willing to do. When you own your mistakes, you can fix your mistakes. Be accountable, be you, because life changes when you do.